on car trips with my young children, inevitably from the back of the car, a little voice would call out, "Did you see that, Mummy?" And a little bit of fear would enter my heart, because really, I hadn't. And I had 3 choices, and none of them really led to satisfactory responses. I could be honest and say no, I didn't see it, which would be met with this big intake of breath, and then the crying would begin because I had neglected my parental duties of devotion and care. I could say yes, but that was lying, and my children are smarter than me, and it would lead to a whole host of repercussions. I typically would say, tell me about it, which gave me a bit of time to try and figure out from their explanation and details so that the crying wouldn't start. But young children have this keen interest in seeing the world, which can lead to some moments of uncomfortable silence in public places after their loudly voiced questions or comments. But it also invites the adults and others into the wonders of the patterns in the cracks of a sidewalk, the stories in the clouds, the fact that cows stand so still in a field of green, and the various other images at which children invite us to take another, deeper look at something we've seen before. There are many similarities between the story of the blind beggar and Zacchaeus in today's reading. Both stories happen as part of a larger public narrative near or in Jericho, witnessed to by many others, including the disciples and crowds of people. Upon hearing of Jesus' arrival, both the blind beggar and Zacchaeus seek to see him. They both experience the dissent and judgment of the crowd, and despite their difference in the socio-economic status, they were both outsiders to the Jewish community. But the blind beggar was saved. His faith saved him. He was healed. And salvation, Jesus said, came to Zacchaeus and his house. But the main thing, the most important thing, I think, was that both the story of the blind beggar and Zacchaeus and their interaction with Jesus helped the crowds and Jesus' disciples to see in a different way. The story of the blind beggar offers a theological paradox. Those with sight are blind to the character of God's presence in their midst, whilst the one who is blind sees clearly that God is present. Those in power in front of him rebuked him. They ordered him to be quiet, which only made this blind beggar, devoid of other options, louder and more persistent. How incredible it would have been for him to witness his miracle walking by. Jesus stands still, and by ordering the man brought to him, by healing him and commending his faith for all to see, challenges the crowd not to overlook, not to forget, but to look beyond what we think we might have seen. What do we overlook? When do we miss the plaintive cry for love or to be noticed? When do we feel forgotten or anonymous? There were new things to think about which emerged in my research on the story of Zacchaeus. Just when I think I have a solid understanding, which doesn't ever happen, it moves again. It shifts. I have always believed that the story of Zacchaeus is a classic story of redemption, forgiveness, and salvation. Jesus saw this man, Zacchaeus, the outsider, the greedy tax collector collaborating with the Roman foreign occupiers. Jesus saw him in the tree and invited himself over for dinner at Zacchaeus' house. And something in that conversation that happened at that dinner, and we can only imagine, changed Zacchaeus' heart, and he decides to share his wealth and fortune with others and bear witness to the kingdom of God. It turns out that there might be something more to this. Dr. David Lewis writes, contrary to most translations, including the New Revised Standard Version, which is the one that we typically use, the tense of the verbs in Zacchaeus' declaration are present, not future. That means Zacchaeus isn't pledging, look, half of my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Rather, Zacchaeus is defending, perhaps, probably in response to the grumbling of the crowd, or just simply stating, look, half of my possessions I give to the poor, and I pay back 4 times, as in right now, already, as a matter of practice. Some of the commentators stated that the translators might have done this on purpose. Imagine such a thing, leaders changing the context to prove their point. They changed the tense to future to support this fundamental Christian theological framework that redemption always leads to salvation, that being saved from sin or error or evil leads to deliverance from harm. Jesus has singled out Zacchaeus in order to stay with him, honoring him with his presence, much to the chagrin of the crowds. And then Jesus honors him a second time by not arguing with his claim about his righteous behavior, but instead affirming it, declaring that no matter what the crowds might think, Zacchaeus is indeed a child of Abraham, one of the covenantal people, a beloved child of God. Like it or not, Jesus seems to say, and contrary to all expectations, this chief tax collector is one of God's own, and even more, lives like it. God incarnate, Jesus dwells with outcasts. Righteousness and justice can be practiced outside of the religious community. Jesus affirms Zacchaeus as a beloved child of God, son of Abraham, and moves beyond the boundaries of the family of faith. In this story, salvation is for the crowd as much as it is for Zacchaeus, and it looks like restoration into the community, acceptance, and inclusion. This is all well and good, but it doesn't satisfy my need for there to be something wrong and unjust about this wealthy man's choices. Since when do I need to get dragged into this? Maybe the framework of redemption and salvation meets our needs more than God's. Maybe it's our way of tracking each other, our way of defining each other, our way of keeping count, keeping score, of following who's in and who's out and who's up and who's down. If we choose to see, then we can notice that the story of our faith is full of stories where God's love regularly overcomes this kind of thinking. Jesus dies precisely to show us that it is. God, Jesus, the whole biblical story, as it turns out, is primarily about relationship. God's deep, abiding, tenacious desire to be in relationship with each and all of us. It gets at the deep things we know right away, because it's way harder work to be in relationship with one another than anything else. And yet, it is the explicit call to us as Christians. Salvation is present in the house of Shaughnessy Heights United Church when our wholeness as individuals and as a community is evident in our practices. And there's evidence all around us. There's evidence in the way that we've affirmed the need for this congregation to be intentional in its faithful discernment of what's next, what's in our future. There's evidence in the way we connect together to celebrate, to grieve, to honor, to love, to restore, to forgive, to work things out, to worship. It's evidence in the way we bear witness to God's loving action through one another. And it's evidence when we open our hearts and minds and notice the life we share. This is reassuring as we move to the cross and we enter into Jerusalem. We can see the end and the beginning. And we follow the blind beggar and Zacchaeus together, finding ways to be supported in our joy and in our anguish. Thanks be to God.